This is the 46 of 46 podcast Summit Sessions, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps, bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 Summit Sessions. Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Summit Sessions here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Today will be a conversation you either love or you hate. Gear talk. An entire episode dedicated to gear. What gear options exist, what certain equipment is a must-have out in the woods, how some gear can save your life, as well as just the typical equipment a lot of people tend to use. From boots to socks to trekking poles to packs to snowshoes to winter layering, it's a gear episode, everybody. And today my guest is Kenny Kendall, a very experienced outdoorsman who spends a lot of time on the trails here in the Adirondacks and elsewhere. And he told me, and I quote, "I could go on for days about gear, finding the balance between creature comforts, minimalism, technology, practicality, aesthetic, and even weight. It's a weird obsession of mine." So needless to say, the man likes to talk gear, and he is here on the show today to talk gear. Ken grew up in both New Hampshire and Alaska, and he spent a decade as a Recon soldier in the military. He's ascended close to 250 peaks, over 4,000 feet in his lifetime, and he also worked in the outdoor gear industry up in Alaska in the mid-90s, so I am excited to hear his opinion on all things gear, because I am not a gear nut, and he is, so he's got a lot of knowledge to share. So, without further ado, Kenny, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, James.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to talk gear. So, a little background on me before we talk to you. In my entire life, I'm a musician, I'm a professional audio guy for a living, and in every line of work, I've never been a big gear guy. I'm pretty simple. I'm a simplistic type of guy when it comes to this subject. And so when it comes to hiking, it's pretty much exactly the same. So I look forward to picking your brain on the amount of different trekking poles that exist. Man, there's just so much to talk about today.
Awesome. Can't wait.
So before we get into it, just give me a quick little background on yourself. How'd you get into the outdoors? What's your background as far as that goes in hiking?
Well, I think you kind of nailed it. So I grew up in New Hampshire in a very pro hunting family. Spent a lot of time just south of the White Mountains, kind of like the Lake Winnipesaukee area. A lot of time out in the woods there. In the mid to late 90s, had a chance to move to Alaska with my old man. Did it. He became a hunting guide up there, and he kind of, sharpened his skill set by taking me out with him. So going from rural New England up to Alaska was kind of a big transition as far as terrain, the type of things you bring with you, the type of things you don't bring with you, the way that you conduct yourself in the backcountry, etc. So that really kind of piqued my interest a little bit. Went into the military, spent some time doing military things, got out of the military and kind of wanted a way to keep enjoying all those things that I grew up doing. But also finding a way to kind of take the stress out of life and just find a way to sort of meander aimlessly through the woods while still being kind of a task-oriented person. So hiking was a natural fit.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense. Very cool. So now over 200, almost 250 peaks over 4,000 feet. So obviously you've hiked all of the high peaks, and I assume all of the whites at that point.
Not all of the whites. Most of the whites. Definitely all New York's high peaks. A little bit of hiking and climbing when I was stationed in Southern California. Okay, cool. Quite a bit of hiking and mountaineering in Alaska. None of the big name things. You're not going to see my name on a Denali roster or anything like that.
Not yet. We won't see your name on it.
Not yet. Right.
Cool.
That's probably not in my cards. I'm a family guy now, so I'm not taking those kind of risks anymore. Hey, kudos to everyone who does, though. No judgment. Seriously, go get it.
Understood. Absolutely. So where was the last place you hiked?
The last place I hiked, oh man, Probably somewhat locally. I actually I live in central New York. Do spend most of my time in the Adirondacks, but I spend a lot of time in Highland Forest, Friends of Great Bear, Green Lake State Park. Anywhere I can get a little bit of time to myself, I take advantage of it. So probably the last place I went to, yeah, Highland Forest, definitely.
Cool, cool. All right, well, let's get into it. So I'm going to structure this episode for gear going from the bottom up. We're going to start with the feet, end with the head. And we're also going to call things that are in your backpack gear. Anything that you have with you on your body is going to be considered gear for the sake of this podcast today. So, socks. I worked in the outdoor industry in Alaska. Take me through socks. Personally, I am a smart wool guy. Everyone wears darn tufts here in the Adirondacks. Socks. Other than smart wool, what are the options out there for people, and what do you tend to wear?
I am actually a darn tough guy when it comes to hiking. Most of the time, I've got a couple pairs of smart wool socks. I wear smart wool socks on a day-to-day basis. I think their product line has gotten a lot better over the few years. If you go back 3 or 4 years, they had some issues with durability, which is kind of why a lot of people started leaning towards darn tough to begin with, I believe. But there's definitely a lot out there, and there's so many companies making a lot of great things now. Older companies, newer companies. Wigwam is another great one. Really, at the end of the day, if I'm going to go hiking, 9 times out of 10, I'm putting on a pair of darn toughs, though, honestly.
Same, 100%. So you don't want to wear cotton socks. Most people know you don't want to wear cotton socks. You don't want to wear cotton anything, really, because cotton won't dry when it gets wet. Even though, in my opinion, and in my world, it doesn't matter what's on my feet. They are going to sweat. They just sweat. I sweat in my back and I sweat in my feet, no matter what. Temperatures be damned. It doesn't make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. And the same. I'm not a small guy by any stretch of the imagination, so I do tend to sweat a lot. And wearing the right socks helps out a lot. It helps you keep from getting blisters. It helps you keep from getting milk toe at the end of the day. It really makes a huge difference. And along the same lines, because of the fact that I'm a big guy and I do sweat, I also tend to stay away from waterproof shoes. Not really a huge fan of Gore-Tex or anything waterproof unless I'm out winter hiking. Most of the time in the summer, I like to stick to approach shoes or trail runners, anything that's very breathable. My feet are going to get soaked anyway. I'd rather just let them dry quickly and air out than, basically be trapped in a plastic bag all day. But that's going to be, it's definitely going to come down to user preference.
Interesting. Now, you use that phrase milk toe, which I've never heard, but I can understand what it is that is. I don't even need to ask any questions. It makes perfect sense, and I've definitely experienced that myself.
Yeah, your listeners probably don't want a detailed description of what it is, but we've been there before.
Absolutely.
It's not a pretty thing.
No, but I've never heard that phrase, so it made me chuckle. So you're more so we hit socks and we're going to boots. So you're more of a trail runners versus boots. I wear waterproof boots. I have Timberland boots, which I am in love with, and they fit my feet so perfectly that I didn't even get a new pair this past year because I couldn't find the exact boot again. So the bottoms of them are just baloney skins at this point. I need new boots bad, but it's so hard to find that perfect boot when it fits your foot. As soon as and honestly with boots, in my opinion, as soon as you put on a boot, you don't need to walk around. You literally need to put it on, and in 1 second, you know if this is the right boot or not, because it just feels perfect on your foot. And that's how both my winter boots are and my summer boots. My winter boots, insulated boots, Vask. I don't know what model they are, actually. They're like $125. They're great boots. And my Timberland hiking boots are, I don't know, I think they're like $85. Not very expensive, but both of them fit perfectly, and I love wearing them because they just fit my foot perfectly. And I'm different in you in that regard. I really like the waterproof element because I like not having to care where I'm stepping. Whereas I've done a few hikes in trail runners or even in sneakers, and I don't like having to kind of tiptoe and worry. Let me just trudge right through. That's kind of more of my style when I'm out there.
That's awesome, man. And to be totally honest with you, and the people who I've hiked with in the past who hopefully will listen to this podcast when it comes out, they'll probably laugh and say that I do the exact same thing in non-waterproof footwear. For the sake of leave no trace purposes, I always stick to the center of the trail. You know what I mean? I don't avoid the mud holes. If they're there, I'm going through them. Obviously, do the rock hop when you can, but the 80K, you get it. Everything's muddy. I have no qualms about splashing through the middle of mud holes, getting my feet wet in water crossings and things like that. I carry extra socks with me. I change them frequently. I know that my feet are going to get soaked anyway. I just let it happen.
So what would you call approach shoes? You mentioned that phrase. I've never heard that phrase before. What are approach shoes, as you worded it?
Sure, yeah. So approach shoes they're kind of a hybrid between, well, nowadays they're kind of a hybrid between a trail runner and a hiking boot. The whole idea behind it is if you're a climber and you're going to go out to like Yosemite Valley or somewhere where there's really significant bouldering and scree climbing to be done before you actually get to your climbing wall. You want something that can handle the sort of quasi-technical terrain in between the actual trail and what you're physically climbing up. So approach shoes are kind of like an all-around hybrid shoe that are designed it's kind of a quiver killer for footwear, in my opinion. I guess it's the best way to put it. So, for example, I use, there's a company called Salewa. They make a shoe called the Wildfire. I use an older version of the Wildfire Pro. So it can be used as a trail runner, albeit it's a little bit heavy for that. You could call it a very light hiker. But the big thing about it is it's got a sole on it that first and foremost is very sticky. I mean, it really sticks to things well. I can take these shoes to the climbing gym with me, and I'm not going to say they're going to perform as well as a dedicated climbing shoe, but they can actually handle a bouldering wall just fine.
Cool.
Yep. So you can jog in them. They won't tear your feet up. They're not overly heavy. The ones I use are not waterproof. They breathe pretty well, but they also have soles that are designed for edging and smearing too, which is great. So if you are on a little bit more technical terrain, you got to do some scrambling, or maybe you're doing a slide climb or something like that, they're totally up to it. So I really like to use them for hiking in warmer weather. And they kind of sort of cross that boundary from where, all right, I want the freedom and mobility of a trail shoe, but I do want the foot protection and stability of a hiking boot, but I also want the traction and confidence that comes with the climbing shoe. So they sort of touch all those aspects.
Cool. I cannot stress enough to people how important the boot is, or the shoe, whatever it is. Man, hiking is it's a long day if your feet hurt immediately. It's just so crucial to, shop around and get the boot, get the shoe. Both shoes, you like both shoes, you can't decide which one to get. Dude, just buy both of them. I know it's more money and it's expensive, but to have shoes and boots that feel so good on your feet just drastically make your experience in the backcountry just so much different.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. It's your vehicle for the day. It's the way that you're getting from point A to point B. The entire purpose of being out on a hike or on a climb or whatever you're doing, your feet are the things that are going to take you from A to B and then back to A again. So it's very important to take care of them. And the same goes for the wintertime too. I mean, I don't have a single pair of boots I use for cold weather. I really don't like using like heavy insulated or duck style or pack style boots that much. I've got a pair of they're kind of a trail oriented sort of a cold weather duck boot type of winter hiker. It's an older pair of Adidas Holtanas. They're great. They are waterproof. They're not overly heavy. They keep my feet very, very warm, but I kind of keep those set aside for like really cold days. Like if I'm going to go out on a winter hike and it's like below 5 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll throw those on. For the most part, I use, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rachel, the boot company.
I'm not.
So they a few years ago, a boot company called Rachel partnered up with another company called Mammut, and they came out with like a collaborative. It's sort of like a lightweight mountaineering boot. It doesn't have the clips, the front and rear clips for like crampon bales, but it is very, very stiff. It's got a lot of support. It's kind of designed to be used for like lighter alpine type stuff. And I primarily use those in the wintertime. I've got a pair of like a hybrid trail crampon that attaches to them really well. They're very comfortable to use as snowshoes. And the thing that I like about them is I can walk all day in them and